What's up, y'all? It's Marcus. Please go to ProPhotoEdits.com where you can download my Lightroom presets and Photoshop actions, and it'll help you out with all your editing needs. Alright guys, so let's check out some of these files. EOS R versus the EOS R5 for a dynamic range test. And these are one-to-one tests. All these pictures that I've taken of my son, just a quick test, were done with the same lens, at the same ISO, the same shutter speed, same f-stop, and that's the RF 1.2 50mm for each one of these tests. And I'll show you the before and afters. What I did to the files is going to be exactly the same. We'll zoom in and I'll give you the raw files to play with. I'm not going to take this on a professional shoot and do it because I've actually already sold the EOS R and I got to get it out to its new owner. So today's going to be the day that I test this just on my son and show you how much you can get away with on each camera. Alright, so this is where we started out with these files right here. And this is ISO 100 and on both cameras 1/500th of a second, and this is the EOS R5. Let's put that back on. Just the adjustment here, we raise the shadows all the way up, blacks up to 58, and we've raised our exposure by 0.70 and our contrast by 17. So let's go over to the EOS R file and I'll show you what it looks like straight out of camera. Exact same, and exact same what we did with it. Now let's take these into compare right here, and you can download these files and check them out yourself. R5 will be here on the right, EOS R on the left. Now you're not going to be able to tell much here because this is the way I typically expose. I will expose just a touch under, and if you look at the eye here, you're not really going to see much at all. This is a fine file. EOS R file is fine. Of course, you zoomed in a little bit here because this is a 45 megapixel versus 30. And this file was actually super clean. The colors are better on the EOS R5. It's just a more rounded file in my opinion. Even though as we get farther into underexposing the files, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go into file number 2, EOS R5. You can see that I'm not pulling your leg. This is the EOS R5 right here. And download the files and check them out yourself. So let's reset this file. Now this is at 1/1600th of a second. Pretty bad underexposure. I wouldn't shoot anything like this in the real world, but this isn't a real world test. This is just pushing the sensor to see what happens. And I'll put this back on what we did to it right over here. Pull the shadows all the way up, blacks up 58, contrast 17, exposure 2.10. And I did the exact same thing to the EOS R file. I didn't have to pull the exposure up quite as much right there. Now let's reset this one and I'll show you. Pretty far underexposed, and this is 1/1600th of a second. Exact same settings on both cameras, and you can look here at the library and see that this is in fact the EOS R. Alright, so let's put the changes back on there, the exposure changes and all the compensation we did. Select them both, go into compare. R5 is here on the right once again, EOS R is here on the left. Now this is pushing the cameras a little bit more, not terrible. The EOS R still looks pretty good to me. I could still use that file if I wanted to. And the EOS R5 looks even cleaner to me. Definitely cleaner, and the colors are more accurate. I think it's just a better sensor overall, obviously. But I mean, I could get away with this. I'm not seeing too much gray areas here where I've raised the blacks, and we started out from the pretty far under right there. So let's go into the final test here where I push them really far, and then we'll see who falls apart and who doesn't. And then I'll take you on a severely underexposed R5 shot and see how much you can get away with. Alright, so here's the R5 for the final test, and ISO still 100, everything's still the same. 1/3200th of a second on the shutter. And let's go here and develop, and I'll reset it for you, and you can see how far under. I mean, that's ridiculous. I would never shoot like that. I would throw that file in the garbage. But check this out. Go back and do our adjustments, and this file you're going to see is actually usable. Exposure I've got up 4.15. The contrast I put up to 59. Highlights I pulled down, and shadows all the way up. Blacks are at plus 58, and that's literally everything that I've done. So let's go to the EOS R file here and reset it, and you'll see that it's identical, 13200th ISO, exactly the same, and severely underexposed. And then let's put that back on. Done. Identical things down here. The exposure, I had to change this a little bit because they react a little bit different as a sensor. Alright, so let's check these out in compare mode and download these and mess with them yourself, but I'll show you what's going on right here. Alright, so R5 on the right again, EOS R on the left. Now let's go in and I'll show you really what you can see. Alright, so I don't know how much you'll be able to pick up, but test these out on your own. The R5 is definitely still a usable file there. I mean, there's a slight bit of noise, but man, I pushed this file harder than I would ever push a file in real life. If I ever shot a file that far underexposed for a portrait, I would just throw it in the trash. Now, if I was shooting something like landscape, which I don't do on a tripod, I would never try to push dynamic range like that. I would take 2 or 3 shots at different exposures and then blend them together. It's just the best way to ever do it. If you can, I mean, if nothing's moving. So over here on the EOS R, you can see that this file pretty much to me is unusable at this point. It's broken, but again, I wouldn't shoot it this far under, no matter what. The file was broken from the beginning because you shot it terribly underexposed for a portrait. But I could get away with that, as you see on the R5, and I could get away with that on the Z7 for sure, on the Z6 most likely. On the Fuji GFX 50 definitely. So you look here at the eyeball and I see nothing but grain, and I can see magenta grain, all types of different color grain, and download these files and play with them and you'll see the same thing. Now I want you to know that I haven't pushed any type of coloring into these files like I do with my presets. Now you start getting into that, this file is just going to just break completely. Now here, if you wanted to print this at like a, I don't know, a wallet size, add a little bit of noise reduction onto it, it might be okay. But you can see that the colors are really getting flat now. This is just like there's gray in his face, and the under eye circle is here. There's gray in his hair. Just your typical push dynamic range on a Canon. This doesn't feel like typical push dynamic range on a Canon anymore. It feels like a Z7 or a A7R4 or something like that to me, just from shooting all these different cameras. It's really close. I still have good color separation, even on a file that was so far underexposed. You can see his shirt is still blue. I don't know if you can still see it on your end. Over here, the shirt is turning a little bit of a gray blue. Just your typical things you get with dynamic range issues. Gray all over the face, not so much over here. And let's go back, and I just want to show you one more time how bad these were to start with. So let's go to the EOS R file here, and I'll reset it. And you can see that that's just terribly underexposed, more so than you'd ever do in real life, unless you just were drunk. So same thing over here. Terribly underexposed. You can barely even see him in the photo. I mean, it got the eye and everything, so, and that's still a usable file to me, which is pretty crazy, knowing that I've been shooting Canon for a while now, and I never, ever push them like this, just because I don't want to be let down in post. Alright, so now I'm going to show you an indoor shot, way underexposed on the R5, and just show you that the dynamic range has been much improved. Alright, so check this out. This is the EOS R, and I'm going to zoom in on his eye, and I'll give you this raw file as well. And you can, I've already converted them to DNG because Lightroom hasn't got an update to convert them for you, so they'll be converted. And look, that's 50mm RF 1.2, ISO 100, shutter speed 1/100th of a second, with the IBIS on, of course. And eyeball is really sharp, as it should be, but check this out. I'll reset this file, and you can see terribly underexposed. I would never shoot like this. I mean, even if I had the Z7 or the Fuji, and I was just shooting the way I do to not blow any highlights for post-processing, this is far underneath what I would even do. So we can show you what I did to it. And look, the colors are still there. This is extremely usable file, and this is kudos to Canon, because I had no faith and them fixing their dynamic range, just because they never have before. Why do it now? But this is incredible to me. This is putting it on the level of something I actually want to take photos with it. I bought the R5 to do mainly video work, and we're going to see how that works out coming up here in a couple of days. And I'm also going to pit it against the Fuji GFX 50R and see how well it stacks up for photos. But you can go in here and see it's still sharp. There's no noise to speak of that I can see. I mean, pretty much at all. I could use this file 100%. The color is still there. All I did was I bumped the exposure up. I didn't have to do much with the shadows. The blacks, pulled them down a little bit to add a little bit of contrast. We can just mess with it a bit here if you want, and I can pull the shadows up a bit. And anytime you pull the shadows up, at least me, I pull the contrast up a bit with it, and then you have a more realistic look at what you're going to get, because you're not just going to pull the shadows up and for no reason without adding more contrast. And then I'll pull the temperature down a little bit, just because we're inside and there's wood everywhere. I never shoot in this room because there's wood everywhere and it casts that orange glow on everybody. But you can see that's a very usable file. The colors are way improved, the contrast is way improved, the dynamic range is way improved. The R5 is an incredible sensor for taking photos. That's all I wanted to say. And I'm not dogging the EOS R. You can go on my channel and see how many shoots I've done with it and had optimal results. I've loved the camera. I just know from the day that I've got it, I pretty much loved it because of the glass I could shoot on it. And I've always shot the exposure pretty much dead on, just a touch under. I'm just talking about just a touch, because on the EOS R you can't push it too far over because you'll lose everything, and you don't want to shoot it under because the files will break whenever you want to really color grade, like I like to do with my presets. And back to feeling totally confident shooting this camera however I want to on the EOS R5. So just know that, guys, if you're looking at this not for video, just for photos, the files are incredible. Kudos to Canon. I'll see you guys on my next video. Please sub to the channel. I love y'all. It's Marcus. Download these raw files and check them out. See you later.